Welcome back to KTN News Center. The Human Rights Watch is this morning releasing a report dubbed Kenya's Sexual Violence in the 2017 elections. The report represents documentation to date of patterns of sexual violence against women and girls and sexual attacks on men and boys committed during recent elections, mostly by policemen or men in uniform. Let's cross over live to this Harova Stanley and listen in.
How many women really will have the courage to stand up and say, okay, let me also go to the police, my experience might be better. We documented failures of police to follow up on complaints, often telling women that if they did not know perpetrators, they could not lodge complaints, or that police could not follow up on investigations because the women did not do the perpetrators. Now, this report we are launching today is very concerning because it documents patterns of sexual violence and government failure that are similar to what Human Rights Watch documented around the 2007-2008 political violence, where the government failed to protect or to prevent sexual violence. It failed to help survivors to get medical treatment and counseling support, or to even genuinely investigate and prosecute. I say genuinely because when you talk to the government, they'll say, we formed a multi-agency task force, we reviewed so many files, but up to today, we don't even know. We have never seen a report from that multi-agency task force. And we are concerned because the government has ignored survivors of sexual violence for a very long time. Many survivors are living in shame because of rape. Yet it is the Kenyan government that should be ashamed for the way it has failed them. Rape causes long-lasting fear and anxiety. It was not really easy for the women that we interviewed to come out and share their stories. But when they speak because they want people to know what happened and they want the government to listen. And we are hoping that this time the Kenya government is going to listen. So in terms of what we are asking from the government is this. First of all, we want the government to publicly acknowledge and condemn the abuses, including sexual violence committed by police or other members of the security forces during the election. It is important because you might ask, okay, how is talking going to happen? It is part of government showing that it is actually concerned and that it acknowledges this is a problem that has to be addressed. We are also calling on the government to urgently and thoroughly document all cases of sexual violence related to the elections. As I mentioned in the introductory remarks, this report is not really a quantitative study of the rape that happened. And I think it is important to go further and document all the cases that happened so that we understand what actually was the extent and what was the complete response from the government. So we are calling for thorough investigation. And we are saying that the government should create an enabling environment for all victims to come forward to report these crimes, and that they should promptly and properly investigate complaints and prosecute the culprits. With regards to human rights abuses that have been committed by the police, including sexual violence, because we understand that there are and there will be challenges of police in investigating their own. We are calling for the government to establish an independent judicial commission of inquiry to examine all unlawful activities of the police during the election period, including those related to sexual violence. And the objective should be to ensure there is accountability for that. But also because we know that political temperatures have not really calmed in Kenya. There is potential for protests, and if these protests happen, as patterns have shown in the past, there will be police brutality, abuses will happen, and probably women will be raped. So we are calling for government to take measures to protect women as well as men and boys against sexual violence by coming out very strongly, issuing strong instructions to police on how they should conduct themselves, and being very clear that they are going to take steps to prosecute any offenders. Now, yesterday we had a meeting with representatives from the police to discuss the findings of this report. It was a positive meeting. They said that they would follow up by asking that all cases of sexual violence linked to the elections that have been reported should be thoroughly investigated and concluded, and that they would be happy to form a multi-agency task force to look into all allegations of sexual violence, including those involving the police. So we are happy that there's that commitment. But I think the challenge is implementation, because as I mentioned before, even in 2008, there was a multi-agency task force, but we don't know what came out of their investigations. There was no public reports to Kenyans to say this was done. So I think for me, just to end, is to say that for a very long time, the Kenya government has failed sexual violence survivors. It has failed to acknowledge that actually these crimes happen, and there are people with names, women, sisters, daughters, fathers, brothers, who are still suffering from these crimes. And the government needs to acknowledge them, and we need to see action. We need to see credible and thorough investigations, and we need to see people prosecuted. And that information has to be given to Kenyans so that they can start believing that surely the government really is serious about protecting women and girls against sexual violence. Thank you.